So we'll now go to the next proposal, LAC-2025-4, version 1. It is called Priority in IPv4 waiting list due to IPv6 deployment. Jordi, you have 10 minutes. I can't hear him. From several authors, we have had proposals. I just needed to let the tech guys know about the screen. There have been different proposals from several authors that they wanted IPv6 to be sort of the stick in the carrot and the stick. So you'd be punished if you don't deploy IPv6. Well, what we want is actually the contrary. We've never reached consensus around any proposal for IPv6 to be mandatory. So I thought, why shouldn't we turn this around and actually have IPv6 as an award? You deploy IPv6 and I reward you, and I'll somehow compensate for the investment that you needed to make for leasing addresses to deploy IPv6, and that way you'll be able to recover at least part of that investment. That's the very generic idea of this proposal. How do we implement it? Well, what I thought about it was to add to section 1 of the policy manual, although it says current text versus proposed, there's actually only the proposed text, is to add a new section item to section 11, which is a wait list, which is the wait list. So once someone's joined the wait list and they deploy IPv6, that would result in then jumping forward some steps in that wait list. So we reward those implementing IPv6, and rather than waiting 7 years, they'll only wait 4, 3, 2 years. We don't know exactly how long, and we cannot commit to a particular deadline because that depends on how many addresses are recovered and other factors. But if that activity has had to lease addresses to deploy IPv6 or even receive a transfer, because that was a new entity, a new ISP, in a way they should receive those addresses earlier to retransfer or to transfer back the ones that they received at the time to recover part of that investment. So the text says the members of the wait list, as a result of the previous section, will jump forward in their position when the effective deployment of IPv6 is justified compared to those that have not done it yet. It doesn't mean that you'll jump to the first petition, but you'll jump before those that have not deployed IPv6, and we will respect the order of the other applicants, and therefore those have not deployed IPv6 will be pushed to the back of the list following the order of the current application. LACNIC will decide how to document such deployment, documentation, proof, and so on. And in case of fraud, because that could be a fraud attempt or an attempt to do it, it will be considered as a breach of policy. So how do I verify the effective deployment of IPv6? Although this is a discussion that we will always have, I think that there are ways of verifying it. I don't want to go into the policy of the text on how to do it, because we could go wrong whether we decide one way and there's a trick in that way and we will find new solutions to verify that deployment. In any case, what we need to consider is that since that deployment, since it's been done, until the addresses from the list are received, we will have a period of 2, 3, or 4 years. There's more than enough time for effective verification. It doesn't mean that I trick you, I deploy tomorrow, and you'll receive the addresses immediately. So there is more than enough time to justify that deployment. And to finish, I think that is my last slide. As far as I know, there's nothing similar in other RIRs. Actually, I am working on similar proposals where there are wait lists. There's no impact assessment yet for this proposal, so let's go directly to Q&A. There are 3 mics in the room. Please state your name, whether you agree or not with the proposal, and then your question when you take the mic. Good morning, Andres Cortés from Costa Rica, Municipality of Carrillo. As I said before, I really think that Jordi's proposal, and I think he's really have a calling and an incline for participating in this public policy forum. So the organization that I represent, I believe, would be benefited from this idea. We've deployed through dual stack. We've been in the wait list for 2 years. We have autonomous system and IPv6 resources, and I truly agree. And that appetite for risk in case that the evidence not being gathered or what's been requested is not clear, well, that should be no impediment to be against or to oppose the proposal, but rather to be seen as an opportunity for improvement, trying to put in place better mechanisms, controls, and the public policy forum would not be closed here. Maybe in other events we can propose changes or updates. I hope it's not just Jordi, but everyone who attends can also submit their own versions of the same policy to reach consensus and enhance governance in our region. Thank you. Jordi? I think that, well, what you've said is something that we have discussed in many times. Policies are ongoing. Approving something that we are not sure how to measure, but we have many years ahead of us, gives us the opportunity to say, well, maybe if necessary, we can enhance it in the future. We can improve it in the future. We've done it many other times. The policy manual is not perfect, and it can be perfected. For example, what we discussed in the first policy this morning. Name, school, Jose Gregorio Godua. I think that the proposal is interesting. Jordi, I have a question. How about the possibility to, like, once an ISP validates IPv6 deployment, maybe all ISPs are equally important, but it's not the same to do a deployment for 1,000 or 2,000 members to 100,000 members. So I would include the possibility to assess the number of members in that assessment or in that evaluation. I understand what you're saying, but every time we analyze how many or who's done it better or who's done it worse, we usually don't reach consensus. So I don't really want to go there. I understand what you're saying, but maybe someone could argue that the smaller ISP should jump more steps forward because the effort is greater. So I think it is better not to get into that discussion. Ricardo Patara. I'm against. I understand the concern, but I would say that the policy is not the tool to promote IPv6. There are many other initiatives, many valuable initiatives in our region. If we look at the IPv6 statistics map, we know that some countries have gone over 50%. Most are stand at around 30%. And maybe the concern is from Europe. Maybe Europe is not as well positioned, but I don't think it's through the policy that we should use to promote it. There are many other initiatives to uh, delve into the ISP aspiration is not what I think is great. Several things to points to raise. The process that we have right now is fair, is transparent. There's a wait list. When you join the wait list, you know what position you are in, and it doesn't change. There is a mechanism that provides certainty and transparency. In addition to that, the implementation of IPv6 varies. Not everyone will implement it in the same way, or not all will face the same degree of difficulty. It's not fair. Transparency changes, and it also changes the way of implementation, ISP, a large, a small ISP. So, well, that's my opinion. Well, we disagree, but in a way that to keep transparency, that information can be provided without disclosing confidential information. The waitlist is public, and it can be disclosed that someone has moved some steps forward because they have deployed IPv6. I wouldn't see a problem with that. I'm against. I think it is not viable because the policy leaves the burden of all of the potential conflicts on the staff. It is an impractical overburden on the staff. I don't think it's viable. There's no way of enforcing it in any way that is fair without conflict, causing conflict across the community. I understand what you're trying to say, but I think that maybe the staff can propose a verification mechanism and the community could approve it. I think that would make it fair. A mechanism that the community has approved. Maybe that would be an enhancement for the proposal. But I don't know up to what extent we should include that text or just a sentence saying that the staff will propose this and this and that. Alfredo LACNIC staff. I just wanted to clarify some aspects. First of all, Jordi, today we have 1,600 organizations in that waitlist that have joined certain by following certain rules, and they have planned accordingly, and we would be changing the rules. So that is something to consider. And then, although we have not published yet the impact assessment, we will do in the future. In 1.5, section 1.5 in the manual, we're speaking about equality in processing requests, and LACNIC should process those requests just in the order that they are received without any exceptional treatment. And this would be going against that statement. I don't think it's a contradiction if it is something that the community approves. What would contradict is if LACNIC on a whim would change that order. In this case, it would be changed based on a policy or a proposal approved by the community. I understand what you're saying, but I don't see that there's a discrepancy or inconsistency in terms of changing rules. I think it was 3 LACNICs ago. There was a proposal where we discussed the retroactive effect, and I was told that yes, that the law was retroactive. So that would be the opposite of what we're saying now. It could be retroactive. There could be retroactive changes. So, for example, the proposals that were over 1 year old, they would expire, but the discussion on the list argued that once the proposal came into force, 1 year after they would expire. However, I was told that there was a retroactive effect. Douglas. Douglas from Brazil. I will speak Portuguese. So I'm against the proposal for more than one reason. The first one's been mentioned several times. It is virtually impossible to have a mechanism to measure the level of IPv6 deployment. It is something that we cannot do. It is intangible. And the main reason for me to be against the proposal is that the type of effort that would entail implementing this policy in terms of man hours, not only the initial efforts but consistent effort, means that we would not be paying attention to more important things. It would distract our attention to other things rather than better use of our resources within LACNIC, and we would not be attending to other more important topics. I think that would be a problem. I would argue the opposite. I think that we would be creating false hope. We would be creating false hope to those that think that will obtain IPv4 in that wait list. The wait list will not change. The numbers will grow. The wait list will continue to exist. So I don't think it is fair to feed that hope to those that will never get IPv4. So the work that this policy would entail would overburden our staff. I think we need to be more productive. I think that there are mechanisms to check the deployment of IPv6, and I know that entails a big initial burden, but it's something that we can plan upon. It's not a manual verification mechanism. I believe we just don't agree. First, I want an applause for Nico, and he's the first one who helped me putting the microphone down after speaking. He's 6 feet tall, and I am 5'2". I'm against the policy, but let me just mention one thing. Regional registries, LACNIC's responsibilities, among our responsibility is to check best practices, IPv6, and we know, and it's been done for many years. Now, another attribute of RIRs is stability. And we are now at a time where we shouldn't add anything that causes unnecessary instability. I cannot imagine the number of disputes, to put it lightly, that a regional registry would receive if, one, they change the rules of the game, and then they try to enforce something that is basically about your word against mine. I am deploying IPv6. No, you're not. Well, how do you measure it? Well, I don't know. And then what would happen if those demands go into legal affairs? So I do not think that the registry should be exposed to that instability because it's not necessary. The world will not turn faster or more slowly because we enforce or not this condition just to promote IPv6 deployment. That is not the way to go. In any other protocol, for the IRR to have a service denial attack due to the workload, and it would be unimaginable to receive many lawsuits or complaints because they are not complying with something that had been done in the past, or because they're changing the rules of the game. So that you are saying that we cannot change any policies because we are changing the rules of the games. The PDP and the policies is based on that. Jordi, I will not argue that, but it's not a good practice to tell someone that someone is saying something that you think that they're saying, but that's just different opinions.
So let us continue with Celsa. Hello. I'm Celsa Sanchez from NIC Chile. Thank you, Jordi, for your policy proposal and for generating a discussion that is so important here in the room. What I would like to consider Or maybe for the proposal, you could consider adding RPKI. It could be interesting that beyond this analyzes the deployment of IPv6, that you can also analyze whether that entity or organization not only has the prefixes signed at RPKI level, but also how much filtering they have in the organization through RPKI, because this contributes to a reality that we're discussing today and should requires discussion and promoting like we're doing with IPv6. That's it. Yes, you're right. I hadn't considered that. It is quite true that I have focused on IPv6 because so far all the proposals which haven't reached consensus, the requirement was IPv6 more as a reward. But maybe we have to improve the proposal and have like a compendium that is IPv6 plus zone signing and RPKI. Thank you. So that microphone over there. Good morning. I'm Mario Salamanca from Bogota in Colombia. I partially disagree with this proposal because in our case we have IP4 and IPv6 deployed. When we were asked if we wish to start with IPv6, we thought this would be like complex and then you had to use your stack. So from that standpoint, I think it's a bit unfair for those who are in the list that when they requested the request was because they mainly needed IPv4, but not because they did not wish to do IPv6. In the example of our organization, as I was saying, and it's a bit unfair because they told us, well, with your ASN, you have IPv6 and you can wait. But if I had been in that waiting list and it told me if you did right away, but then the policy will change for those who are still waiting and then decide to have IPv6. So it's very unfair. So those who are already on the list, how much do they have to wait until they deploy IPv6? What will be the rationale and so on? So I partially disagree with this proposal. Let me clarify that if you are in the list and have already deployed IPv6, you would go forward with your position the way the text is worded. In terms of the timing, the time is not being specified, but because we know it will take many years until we can deliver the addresses, you all have time to do so. But from that standpoint, Noble will be advancing at a faster pace. So the things would remain exactly the way they are now. What you can advance in the list is that once you confirm that you have deployed IPv6, that is a date that allows you to go forward in your position. But the origin of the list is that you receive IPv4 and not IPv6. That's my point of view. Thank you. Fernando? I would like to make two comments. The first comment has to do with what Mr. Fischer said regarding what some people are saying regarding the implementation of IPv6. And from my point of view, this seems to be easier than what I think. It's not much different from what we are used to doing. When an organization receive a block from the waiting list, this you can have a BNG or demonstrating implemented IPv6 is not 100% in the network. So you have along the same line, when you justify the need for using it, it's not perfect, but I think it's quite reasonable. And so I think that the concern seems to be lesser than what it might seem. And secondly, I sort of like the proposal. As a policy forum, we have to be more courageous in having an incentive for those who do things correctly, for those who apply best practices. This policy forum is responsible for establishing the necessary requirements in order to assign the numbers, and this would be a more fair requirement. And those who are transferring IPv4 addresses or receiving IPv4 addresses are worsening the problem. They're generating more IPv4 traffic. I also bear that in mind. So I think, and you have to demonstrate that you have adopted IPv6. But if someone is being transferring IPv4, you're worsening the ecosystem. So you need to have incentives for those who do things correctly. And in this policy forum precisely is responsible for establishing such requirements. So I don't see no inconvenience in that sense. So thank you very much for your comments. We will now proceed to measure the temperature in the room. I'd like LACNIC's staff to assist me. Please put this poll in the Zoom. Remember, we're not voting. You just have to state that you agree or disagree or abstain. Those who agree with the proposal, please raise your hand.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you. Raise your hand, those who are against the proposal.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Those who abstain, please raise your hand and keep your hands raised. Thank you very much, everyone. Let me remind you that the proposal LAC-2025-4 version 1 priority in the waiting list of IPv4 for deployment of IPv6 is still being discussed in the list. Please send your emails. Subscribe to the mailing list. You can subscribe today if you wish, and you can send an email today. You don't need to have registered for a long time. The discussion of this proposal finishes on October 28th, 2025. Thank you.
La siguiente propuesta es la LAC-20.
The next proposal is LAC